Welcome to SWSi Floristry. My name's David Berger, and in this session we're going to learn how to make a specific shape. The specific shape that we're making using pinning techniques is an Anzac wreath or laurel wreath. The shape is a chaplet, which represents a teardrop, and this has been covered in wreath wrap, which is a green material that goes over the styrofoam base. The styrofoam is the easiest mechanics to pin into. To start your laurel wreath, you need to cover the outside and inside edges with leaves. I've bent some 20 gauge floristry wire into hook shapes with two prongs extending about 1 centimetre out from the end of the hooks. That's what I'm going to use to pin the leaf down onto the styrofoam. The first set of leaves, I want to extend them over the edge of the top of the wreath, and then with my pin I'm going to put my pin in at a 45-degree angle and push it up into the wreath to secure the leaves. I'm using two laurel leaves that are placed side by side, and with this technique we need to make sure that the tip of the leaf is aligned, but the bottom of the leaf that will be covered can be different levels. It's the tip of the leaf that you need to make sure is aligned on the same level. Then you're going to place your pin at the 45-degree angle up into the leaves about halfway along the leaf. Then we're going to just continue in a pattern of covering the pin with another set of leaves where the tips have been aligned and placing the pin halfway into the leaf. I'm going to continue this pattern and cover the sides and the inner side of the wreath, and then I will show you how to do the base of the wreath and finish that off. I've continued along the outer edge of our laurel wreath, and now I'm down at the base, midway but at the base of the wreath. I've also made sure that the leaves all face up to the top of the chaplet of the shape, so all the tips are facing up. So then when I come to the bottom of the wreath, the leaves are facing opposites. So I just need to finish off by again concealing the wire along the base of the wreath by pushing my hairpin into the base of, or halfway along the leaf. And then just to finish off the base of, what I'm going to do is fold a leaf over to hide the last pin. And I'm going to pin that into the styrofoam wreath by placing one of the pins inside the folded leaf so that there's no wire or mechanics showing. And depending on the size of the laurel wreath or laurel leaf that you're using, you might have to pin 2 or 3 just to cover that last little bit of your mechanics at the base of the wreath where the two ends of the leaf are coming together. This just gives a neat finish so there's no pin or none of the hairpins or wires are showing at the base of the wreath. So it will depend on the size of the leaf that you're using. If you have a large laurel leaf, you might only need to put 1 of these twists in. With the ones that I've got, I need to put 3, and then that's going to cover the base of the wreath. And on the inside, I've done the same, where all the leaves are pointing to the top of the chaplet. So the leaves are going up, and I'm going to do the same twisted or turned leaf treatment to cover the last pins at the base of the inside edge of the wreath, and then we're going to move on to dressing the front of the wreath with leaves. I've now completed covering the inside and the outside edges of the chaplet, and I've also dressed the last pieces of wire with the turned laurel leaf. When we're making a specific shape such as this, what we need to do is grade the leaves. So you can notice that I've separated the leaf into the smallest, medium and large laurel leaf from the stem. You'll always find that the smallest leaf will be from the tip of the stem of laurel, and then the largest leaves will grow at the base of the branch when you're grading them. I'm going to attach these now onto the front of our laurel wreath, and I'm going to start at the tip of the chaplet with the smaller leaves because this is the finer point of the shape. When we're putting the front leaves on, with our side leaves, it depends on the width of the leaf as to how many leaves we need to put on the side of the wreath. If our laurel leaf was very wide, we could put one single row. I've placed 2 of these leaves to put on the side of the wreath, but on the front of the wreath we always use 3 leaves, as this symbolises the 3 branches of the armed forces. We put 1 laurel leaf that is complete on the front and 2 leaves behind it. Again, we're looking to make sure that the top leaf is slightly longer than the 2 side leaves, which are aligned together. This is going to form all the placements on the front of our Anzac wreath. So we always place the leaves in sets of 3 for this part of the design. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin the leaf onto the chaplet. So the first set of leaves, I want to make sure that they extend up beyond the edge of the chaplet and that the leaves are straight up. That is our first placement of leaves. When I'm placing all the other leaves, what I'm going to do is to make sure that they run the shape of the chaplet. So from then on, they're going to run down each side of the wreath, the same as we did the internal lining. They're going to run down each way with the tip of the leaf facing up to the top of the chaplet shape. And I'm also going to just make sure that the full leaf is always the middle leaf, and the 2 side leaves are slightly shorter than the middle leaf, but there the 2 side leaves are aligned. And what we do, if you need to cover a little bit more of the wreath shape, you can just fan the leaves out slightly to make sure that they cover all the space and that there's none of the green wreath wrap showing between or under the leaves. So I'm going to continue dressing down with the smaller leaves until I get to about the bottom third of the chaplet. So I'm going to bring these smaller laurel leaves down to 2/3, and I'm going to leave the third, and then we're going to do a slightly different placement on those. I've now dressed both the outside, the inside, and the first 2/3 of the chaplet with the laurel leaves. Up until now, the top 2/3 of the wreath, I've been able to use 3 of the leaves, and where necessary, I've spread the shape of the leaf out slightly. Now with the bottom third, to make sure that we're giving the correct balance and proportions to our specific shape, I will need to put 2 rows of leaves on. So I do this in the same formation as I've done the other leaves. The full leaf at the front with the 2 outer leaves slightly recessed from the first point, but the same. And then I'm going to put them into rows of 2 along the front of the wreath. This is also why we grade the leaves. I've used my smaller leaves at the top of the chaplet, which is the narrower part of the design, and then I'm using the larger leaves that I graded from the base of the laurel branch in the bottom 1/3 of the wreath. So I'm just putting the 2 rows of leaves out to make sure that all the side of the wreath wrap is covered, that there's no styrofoam left showing, or none of the base showing on the wreath. And I just continue along the same pattern, putting the rows side by side on this larger part of the wreath frame. What I'm then going to do is to go down to the base of the chaplet and finish that off. So I'm going to continue putting these 2 rows of leaves out, and remember to still keep all the leaves running up to the top of the chaplet. So when we get down to this part of the wreath, you'll normally find it a more systematic and easier approach to do each side simultaneously. That's also going to make sure that you're grading your leaves correctly and you come out with a symmetric coverage of the wreath. The chaplet wreath is a symmetrical shape, so by placing the leaf to the right and to the left at the same time, we're going to make sure that we end with a symmetrical pattern or sizing of the leaves. Just always ensuring that we have the full leaf as the top leaf in our set of 3, and the other leaves slightly recessed but down from the top leaf. So what I'm also doing now, as I come to the horizontal part of the wreath, is making sure that the mid ribs on the laurel wreath, the strong line in the center, is starting to line up with the shape of the wreath. So if you look around the wreath, you'll see that the mid rib is aligned all centrally along the wreath, and then I'm doing the same formation at the base of the wreath where it flattens out and becomes a horizontal placement, so that the line of the wreath is maintained and the line of the leaves are strengthened. If your leaves become loose at all when you're placing them onto your wreath at the base, where you're pinning through several layers of the laurel leaves, then you can put another hairpin in just to secure any of the placements. Just remember to cover the hairpin with the leaves so that none of your mechanics or the pinning technique is visible from the front or the sides of the completed wreath. I'm then moving down now into the central part of the wreath, so I'm aligning it with the center of the chaplet, and I'm putting the leaves now flat along here to cover the last part of the wreath wrap. And then what I'm going to do is use some cut portions of the laurel leaf. So now that I've got the leaves going up and around the top, what I want to do is finish off the base of the leaf, of the wreath. So what I've done is taken the base of some of the leaf, so I just have the top portion left. These ones I can individually pin into the wreath to finish off the base. This is very symbolic of the sunrise, and also if you look to the RSL symbols or any of the army symbols, you will see this radial pattern representing the sun shining or setting, reproduced in lots of their insignia. And this is a reason that we also finish the wreath off in this pattern. So just with the cut portions of the wreath, I'm going around and making that pattern in the end of the leaves. So just take care now when you're pinning through so many layers of the laurel leaves. That's why we need the 20 gauge floristry wire that we've left the prongs approximately 1 centimetre long on. Make sure as well that we cut the wires with some nice sharp wire cutting scissors so that the ends are sharp, so they penetrate through the leaf and into the styrofoam base below easily. Also remember to angle the pin as you press it into the foam, and that way as well there's no danger of piercing yourself with the wire. The wire is left approximately 1 centimetre in length as well, because there must be no sharps or wires that protrude through the thickness of the styrofoam. And angling the wire also helps for this not to occur. Once I've gotten the radial pattern in the base of the wreath, I'm then going to dress the very base of the wreath with some permanent botanical poppies and a Lest We Forget sash. I've now completely covered the chaplet shape in the laurel leaves, both on the inner edge, the outer edge and the front, two-thirds down with the single row of leaf, and then the bottom third was the double row of leaf, and also finishing the radial shape at the base by removing the bottom half or third of a laurel leaf, so I can put those cut leaves into the base. What I'm going to do now is to complete and put the permanent botanical poppy flowers and also some rosemary onto the Anzac wreath. The rosemary is symbolic of remembrance, and the poppies are symbolic of the Flanders poppies that were growing in Gallipoli, and that is why we always dress an Anzac wreath with the poppies and the rosemary. The poppies should be 3 flowers used, again like the laurel leaf, to represent the 3 arms of the forces from the army. I'm now going to work on the spray of the permanent botanical poppies and the rosemary on the base of our Anzac wreath. Remembering that this is a symmetrical arrangement, and I'm placing 3 poppies and sprigs of rosemary. I've wired the rosemary using a hook wire method, and then I can insert these into the styrofoam underneath. Remember as well to angle your wires on the 45-degree angle when you're placing anything into the styrofoam, so that the wire is not going to penetrate through the depth of the styrofoam and be a sharp on the underside. If you need to, you can shorten your wires before insertion into the foam. What I'm doing is creating an arc, a balanced distribution of the rosemary, creating it slightly higher on the sides and then a circle in the middle. I'm going to now place my artificial permanent botanical poppies into the styrofoam, again making sure that the actual stem of the permanent botanical doesn't penetrate onto the underside or through the underside of the styrofoam. So I'm doing that again by angling the stems. These are on a wired stem so they can be manipulated around. Sometimes these will also come with a bud, and the bud needs to be placed at the ends of the spray so the finer points are pointing up towards the top of our chaplet, and the larger open flowers are at the base of the chaplet. If I want to place the last bud into our spray, I'm going to place that so it faces the very center of the base of our chaplet shape. Then with some smaller pieces of the hook wired rosemary, I can fill in any gaps where we can see any of the mechanics of any of our wiring to ensure that, as always, our mechanics are completely concealed in the production of our item. So I'm going to make sure that the poppies are completely showing, the buds are aligned on each side to make sure that there's a symmetrical balance, and our other bud is at the base of the spray. I'm now going to add the Lest We Forget scroll or ribbon to our chaplet. I'm going to roll the end of the ribbon around on itself to form a scroll, and then I'm going to make sure that the text will be completely visible, and the text runs from the left to the right, the same as we read text, and also to symbolize the way that a gun is presented by a soldier. I'm going to place a straight pin through the folds of the ribbon and into the styrofoam underneath. Again, always ensuring that I make a nice angled insertion into the styrofoam so that the sharp end of the pin doesn't come out through the end underside of the wreath. I'm then going to roll the other side of the ribbon, making sure that the text is aligned, and then again I'm going to place the pin through the folds of the ribbon deep underneath the scroll so that the pin cannot be seen, and this is the way that we hide the mechanics of the attachment of our ribbon onto our laurel wreath. We now have our completed specific shape, which is a chaplet of laurel wreaths suitable for a memorial service for Anzac, with our Lest We Forget ribbon scrolled across from left to right.